Well, so you find yourself in the market for a C5 Corvette, or maybe you just got your hands on a C5 Corvette, and understandably so. For under 15 grand, you can get a hold of a very capable sports car that's lightweight, torquey, and it sounds fantastic. And yes, although they are over 20 years old at this point and far too old for Leonardo DiCaprio, they are still very, very capable and rival much newer sports cars on the market today. Assuming that the engine is strong, of course, and that the transmission shifts smoothly still, and you're not leaking a bunch of fluids everywhere, there's still a list of items you're going to want to address immediately. I have a sneaking suspicion that you have a strange chirping noise coming from under the hood. This seems to be very, very common in Corvettes, and it could be a number of things, either belts generally or pulleys. You can test this out pretty easily by taking a little bit of water and dropping it on the belt while the engine idles. If the chirping goes away, you know most likely it's just a belt and it needs to be changed. Over time, they get stretched and hot and worn out, and they start to slip on these pulleys, causing a chirping noise. Now, if the chirping remains after doing the water test, it's probably a pulley. In my experience, it's either the tensioner or it's the idler pulley on the accessory side. Now, while you're in there changing out these pulleys, you might as well change them all. It's for like $100 or so. You get the belts and the pulleys, and you can address the issue all the way. There is a possibility that it is none of these things, and it could potentially be the alternator. Now, it's likely not the alternator itself, but it is the bearings in the pulley on the alternator that can cause the problem. It's a little bit weird. That bearing goes bad in that pulley, and as the belt is rotated and trying to spin the alternator, there's a lot of resistance. So the belt is slipping, causing the chirping because that pulley doesn't want to rotate as freely as it should. I guess technically you can replace the pulley, but why would you? And if you need to replace the whole alternator, my suggestion is to just get a brand new OEM or OEM replacement alternator. I say this because Corvettes are very sensitive to voltage, and the remanufactured alternators that a lot of people will recommend aren't good. And the problem is that they use cheap voltage regulators and they don't keep a consistent voltage. Now, they'll test just fine and they'll be within spec, but the problem is that the Corvette is so sensitive, it sees these slight variations. Even if it's 0.2 or 0.5 volts, it will see that swing going back and forth, and there's something about it that it just doesn't like. So to avoid swapping out alternators thinking that one is bad or whatever, just get a brand new one. Another system that I would address immediately is the braking system. Now, the original owner probably did just fine in taking care of the brakes on these Corvettes, but it seems to be that as you get 2, 3, 4 owners on these cars, the braking system seems to be neglected. Now, a good set of rotors, some good quality brake pads, a little bit of cleanup, some stainless steel braided brake lines filled with a good quality high temperature brake fluid like a Motul .5.1, for example. That's going to make a whole world of difference in how the car brakes and handles corners. Speaking of flushing and bleeding, no, we're not talking about injuries, we're talking about the clutch system, and putting in new clutch fluid and making sure that it's bled properly goes a long way, and this is something you're going to want to keep up with over time. It just seems to be another system that's neglected by previous owners, and you're just going to it's just going to help you out in the long run. So while you're doing all the fluid stuff, go ahead and address the clutch fluid as well. And then go ahead and move to the transmission and the rear diff, because those are two very easy fluids to change out as well. And it just goes a long way in keeping your drivetrain running and operating nice and smoothly. Heading to the interior of the car, I would just start pulling some panels out. Honestly, you're probably going to want to upgrade to some LED lighting, either in the door controls or the gauges or in your infotainment / HVAC area. Now, I'm not somebody that's going to be pulling stuff out and resoldering wires and all that kind of crap, but if you're able to easily change some LED bulbs simply in some of these areas, I would certainly do that, because again, these cars are 20 plus years old at this point, and a lot of the lights are starting to fail or get very, very dim, and it makes it tough at night to see what controls and where they are, what your controls are and where they are. Another very simple upgrade or improvement that you can make is the sun visors. I know, I just have a feeling that yours are either tilty, floppy, broken, or maybe they're just missing. For $50, you can check the link in the description below and get yourself a set of new ones, and the lights will work, and they'll be nice and firm, and they'll hold themselves up, and they'll look good, and it goes a long way, truly, in the aesthetics of the interior of your Corvette. I hate droopy, saggy, gross looking old beat up sun visors. I'd not even put them in cars if it were up to me, but because they're there, put some new ones in. It makes a difference. And finally, this is a little one, but probably one of my favorite upgrades that I've made myself recently is the shift boot. There's a very high likelihood that your shift boot is in crap condition, and there's even more of a likelihood that the retainer of the bezel that holds the shift boot down into your center console is mangled cracked, broken, just a disgusting mess. It's not a good design. They're very thin plastic. It's very cheap. And once you take it out, it never goes back in the same way, unfortunately. So the best thing to do is just replace it. But the problem that I found is that there aren't many options online for new ones. And the ones that are available online are very cheap. The material is cheap. The bezel's even cheaper than the factory one. And it's just, I just hate it. I bought one myself, 80 bucks, installed it, looked fine. Pulled it out one time to address some things in the interior, and it just never went back in tight. So it looks loose. There's a gap between the leather and your center console. I just don't like that. I like things to look clean and crisp. So what I did was get a hold of some high quality leather. I mapped out a template and I sewed it up myself. I'm considering making a bunch of these and putting them out for sale to the market. Let me know in the comments below if you guys would be interested in this, but it's one of my most proud updates so far to the C5 Corvette because I made it myself. I was able to find a metal retainer that's available online. I'll put a link in the description below to that. Thank goodness for people that are crafty and clever out there making stuff that we can use. It seems to hold the shift boot in your center console a lot more firmly and a lot more flush and flat to your center console. So I like that. So check out my installation video on the channel if you get a chance. And let me know what your thoughts are. So yes, the C5 Corvette is still tough to beat in 2024, even 20-something years old at this point, but there are certainly a couple of things you're probably gonna wanna address right out of the gate. Fortunately, I got a bunch of videos posted to the channel already where I tackle a bunch of these projects. Oh, another one has come to mind. You're probably gonna wanna change the wheel bearings front and back, and it's not too bad of a project. Oh, and on top of that, you probably wanna do your tie rod ends as well. And nonetheless, I got videos on a lot of these things already posted to the channel, and there's a lot more coming for the Speed Culture Studio C5 Corvette. So I hope you guys will stick around if you're interested in Corvette content at all. I appreciate you guys watching this one very, very much. I appreciate the support up to this point, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.